You've made it through the day. Now it's time for something gentle. Good evening, friends. I'm Mr. Narratory, and I'll be your voice tonight as we drift gently towards sleep. If these stories help you relax or fall asleep a little easier, consider liking and subscribing. It really means a lot. Tell me in the comments. What time is it for you right now? And do you have any little bedtime rituals? Now, settle in, get comfortable, close your eyes if you'd like, because it's time for tonight's story. I moved into the building in early March. Rent was cheap. Too cheap for the location. The ad said, quiet tenants and a charming historic vibe. What it didn't say was that the elevator hadn't worked since 2011 and that half the units were permanently locked. The landlord was a woman in her 60s named Carol who smelled like dry soap and orange peels. She showed me apartment 3B. It was clean, small. The windows faced the alley. I didn't care. I needed out of where I'd been. On my third day there, I noticed the door. It was on the same floor as mine. End of the hall. Deep navy blue with a brass number plate that had been scratched beyond recognition. No name, no mat. The doorknob was old but polished, like someone used it often, but I never saw anyone go in or out. What I did notice was the tape. Small, clear strip across the upper corner of the door, sealed tight, like someone wanted to know if it had been opened. I asked Carol about it once. She paused, smiled tight, and said, "Oh, that's just for storage. Nothing interesting behind that door." Then changed the subject. I didn't press her, but I started paying attention. At night, I'd sit in my kitchen with the lights off and the door cracked just enough to see down the hallway. And sometimes, just after midnight, I'd hear it. A shuffle, a soft bump. Once I swear I saw a shadow move across the gap under the door. But when I opened mine to check, the hallway was empty. Always cold, always still. Then, after 2 weeks, the mail stopped, specifically for that unit. The young guy who handled deliveries, Matt, always had earbuds in and nodded when he passed. I asked him once about that apartment. He looked up, puzzled, and said, "Man, that door freaks me out." I put mail there for months, but it always disappears. Like the next day it's gone. Never see anyone. Not once. He laughed, but it was nervous. I never saw Matt after that Friday. I thought maybe he quit, until I saw his bike still chained outside the next morning, and his mailbag hanging from the handlebar. I couldn't stop thinking about Matt. He was quiet but polite, always nodded when we passed, sometimes smiled, never late, never careless. Seeing his bike still chained to the gate 3 days after he vanished didn't feel right. At first I thought maybe he left town suddenly. Family emergency, but his mailbag was still there, full, rain-soaked. His name tag half peeled from the strap. I asked Carol if she'd heard anything. She looked at me like I was bothering her and said no, probably just quit. These young people do that. I asked if anyone had picked up his things. She said she'd toss it soon if no one did, then walked off before I could say another word. I stood there a while, just watching that bike, like it would unlock something. It didn't, but something else did. That night, I heard it again. The sound from the blue door, just past midnight, a low thud, then dragging, not loud, not violent, just deliberate. I opened my door slowly, held my breath. The hallway was dim, one overhead bulb flickering faintly. At the end of the hall, the blue door stood perfectly still, but on the ground just in front of it was something small. I walked toward it cautiously. It was a key, no tag, old, brass, worn smooth. I picked it up and looked around. No sound, no footsteps, no other doors open. I slipped it into my pocket and returned to my apartment without turning my back. I didn't sleep. I sat at my table holding the key under the lamp. It didn't look like a modern key, more like something for a padlock or an antique chest. But something about it felt right, like it was made for that door. I waited until morning. When the sun came through the alley window, I got dressed, walked back down the hall, stood in front of the blue door with the key in my hand. The tape was still there, unbroken. I hesitated, just for a second. Then I slid the key into the lock. It fit, turned without resistance. I stopped before pushing the door open, listened. Nothing. No breathing, no footsteps, just silence. I opened it slowly. Inside was nothing like I expected. No boxes, no storage. Just a single chair in the center of the room, and a pile of mail on the floor. All of it addressed to Apartment 3D, and every envelope was torn open. I stepped into the room and the air hit me like a wall, stale, thick, like a closet that hadn't been opened in years. The curtains were drawn, but light leaked in from a gap near the ceiling. It wasn't a real window, just a cracked panel that led to a ventilation shaft. The walls were bare, no paint, no shelves, just faded wallpaper with small yellow flowers curling at the edges. The chair in the center was metal, rusted. One leg bent slightly, like it had been kicked. The pile of mail near it was messier up close. Open envelopes, torn edges, letters scattered. I bent down and picked one up. Final notice. Another. Overdue. Then a handwritten envelope with no return address. I opened it. Inside was a photo of the hallway, my door, and Matt standing in front of it with a package in his hand. I looked at the date on the back. It was marked 4 days before he disappeared. I stood up fast, heart racing. The floor creaked beneath me. Not just normal wood creaks, hollow, like something beneath. I stepped back and heard it again. I knelt and ran my hand along the edge of the floorboards near the wall. One piece felt loose. I dug my nails under it and pulled. It popped up with a splintering snap. Beneath it was darkness, a gap between floors. I leaned closer and felt cold air rise from below. Then something else, a smell, not rot, not death, just wrong, metallic, damp, familiar in a way I couldn't place. I pulled up more boards until I could see clearly. It wasn't a crawl space. It was a room, a hidden chamber between floors. No ladder, no light, just shadows. But I could see shapes, boxes, a mattress, and something slumped in the corner. I pulled out my phone, turned on the flashlight. A face stared back at me. It was Matt. his body twisted, eyes open, mouth slightly parted, like he'd been frozen mid-sentence. His mail sat beside him, scattered, damp, unopened. I didn't scream. I couldn't. I backed away, slowly, shut the panel, replaced the boards. I left the room without closing the door. Back in my apartment, I locked everything, closed every curtain, sat on the floor shaking. I called the police 3 times before I said anything. When they arrived, I led them to the room, showed them the panel. But when they lifted the boards, there was nothing underneath, just concrete, flat, sealed, untouched. I stood there while the officers looked at me like I was wasting their time. They knocked on the blue door, opened it, shined flashlights around. One of them even stomped on the floor. Solid, they said. Just floor. No space, no hidden room, and definitely no body. I tried to explain. Told them about the smell, the photo, the chair, the mail, but none of that was there anymore. Even the letters had vanished. The room was empty, like it had reset itself. The officers left without filing a report, said I should get some sleep, that old buildings play tricks on you. I didn't answer. I just nodded and closed the door. I sat at my table for hours, replaying every second. I knew what I saw. I knew that was Matt, and I knew someone didn't want him found. That night I didn't sleep. I left the lights on, kept the key in my hand. Around 3 a.m. I heard footsteps in the hall, slow, even, moving from one end to the other. I peeked through the peephole. No one. But the sound didn't stop. It circled the floor like someone was pacing or waiting. Then I heard my mailbox open. Not loud, just the soft metal click. Then footsteps again. I waited until it was quiet, counted 60 seconds, then opened the door. The hallway was empty, but my mailbox was open. Inside was another envelope, unmarked. I took it out with shaking fingers. Inside was another photo. This time, it was me, sitting at the kitchen table, looking down at something. From above, the angle was impossible, unless someone had been inside. I dropped it and stepped back, locked the door, deadbolt, chain. I checked every corner of the apartment, every closet, under the bed. Nothing. No sign of a break-in. No sign anyone had touched a thing. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. That whatever was in that blue-doored room hadn't just reset itself. It had moved. It had shifted the story, like it knew I was trying to pull it into the light. And now, it was pulling back. I took the photo to Carol the next day, told her everything. She stared at me with tired eyes and said I wasn't the first tenant to ask about that room. Then she said something I'll never forget. She said the door was never locked until the last man who lived there went missing, and no one ever saw what was under the floor, but they heard it breathing. I asked Carol who the last tenant was. She said his name was James Hollow, lived there for 6 months, kept to himself, paid rent in cash. One day he didn't come to the door. She waited a week, then opened it with the spare key. The apartment was empty. No furniture, no signs of packing, just a folded blanket in the center of the room and a tape recorder on top. She didn't listen to the tape. She just locked the door and said it was better that way. I asked her if she still had it. She said no. That's what she claimed. But I saw the way her eyes shifted, the way she stepped back, like the memory still lived somewhere in her hallway. I went back to my apartment and started looking for anything I missed. I pulled up the corners of every rug, checked every vent, tapped on walls. The blue door stayed closed, but now I started hearing things behind it. Not voices, sounds, scraping, light tapping, rhythmic like breathing. It came and went. Sometimes I thought it was my own paranoia. Sometimes I knew it wasn't. The next night there was another photo in my mailbox. This one was different. It was a shot of the hidden floor, the same crawl space, but this time it was empty. No mat, no boxes, no mattress, just shadows. And in the corner, a shape I hadn't seen before. A figure, thin, watching, facing the camera. I didn't remember that when I first opened the floor. I turned the photo over. On the back was a date, 3 days from now. It hadn't happened yet. That night, I put tape on the inside of my door. Small, clear strip, like the one on the blue door. Just to see, just to check. When I woke up the next morning, the tape was broken, but the locks were still in place. I checked the windows, all sealed. Then I noticed something on the floor, a cassette, no label. I had to dig through boxes to find an old player. Plugged it in, pressed play. At first it was just static, then breathing, then a voice. It was mine, saying the words over and over. It's not locked. It's waiting. It's not locked. It's waiting. Then the sound of footsteps, then silence, then a second voice. Not mine, not human, saying my name. I listened to the tape at least 10 times that morning, not because I wanted to, because I couldn't stop. The way my own voice sounded didn't feel right, like it was filtered through something heavier, slower. It didn't sound recorded. It sounded like a memory being repeated by something that only half understood language. The worst part was that second voice. It didn't say much, just my name, whispered, wet, like breath through a locked door. And after that, nothing. No click, no stop, just dead air, hours of it. I left it playing while I checked the apartment again. Every drawer, every cabinet. No sign anyone had been inside. But the tape had to come from somewhere, and someone had to record it. I went back to the blue door, stood in front of it with the key in my pocket. I didn't open it. I knocked. Nothing. Knocked again. The sound echoed back like it hit something soft. Then a click. Not the lock. Not the door. The sound of a light switch. I opened it slowly. The room was darker than before. The chair was gone. The floor was bare. But on the wall, written in chalk, were words. Not mine. Just 4 of them. You were always inside. I backed out, closed the door, didn't lock it. I didn't see the point. It knew how to get out. That night the sound came again, but this time not from the hall, from my closet, from behind the wall. I placed my ear to the wood. A hum, slow, steady. Then fingers tapping. 1, 2, 3, then pause. Then again. I didn't open it. I couldn't. Instead, I left the apartment, walked outside into the cold, and sat on the curb for hours. I didn't call anyone. I didn't tell anyone. I just sat there with the key in my hand like it still meant something. I looked up at my window. The lights were off, but the curtain moved, like someone had just stepped away. When I finally went back inside, everything looked normal. My apartment untouched. The tape stopped. The key gone. In its place was a photo on the table. This one was different. A woman, pale, short hair, standing in front of the blue door, smiling. Her eyes looked like mine. On the back of the photo was a name, my mother's, and a year, 1988. I stared at the photo for hours. The date didn't make sense. I wasn't born yet, not for another 2 years, but it was definitely her. The same face from old albums. Same way she used to tilt her head when she smiled. Same necklace she wore in every childhood memory I had. Only this time she was standing in front of the blue door, the one on my floor, the one I was told had been sealed for years. I flipped the photo back over, no message, just the date. 1988. I called my mother 3 times before she answered. It was late. Her voice was groggy. I asked her if she'd ever lived at this address. There was a long pause. Then she said no, never. I asked if she was sure. She said, of course. That's not a place I would have been. I described the building, the blue door, the way the hallway looks. Silence. Then she whispered, "You're in Hollow House?" My throat tightened. I asked what that meant. She didn't answer, just hung up. I tried to call back, straight to voicemail. I sat in my kitchen with the lights off, thinking about that name, Hollow House. I searched it. Local archives, property records, nothing official. But I found an article buried in a forum from 2009. A man claimed the building was a government testing site during the late 80s. Psychological trials, sound deprivation, experimental therapy, all unconfirmed. But the name stuck. He said the 4th floor didn't exist on the blueprints, that it was added later. Quietly, off record, a place for volunteers who stopped being volunteers. I didn't want to believe it, but everything was lining up. The door, the tapes, the photos. My mother, the next morning, I tried her again. Number disconnected. I called my uncle, asked if he knew where she was. He said she was fine, on a trip. Hadn't mentioned anything strange. I told him about the photo, the building. He got quiet. Then said she had a breakdown in 1989. Said she disappeared for almost 2 months. Came back different. Said she never talked about where she'd been. Only that it was cold and quiet. I hung up. I went back to the blue door. It was open. Inside was the chair again, and on the seat, a tape. This one had a label. It said, "Mom." I brought the tape into my apartment and stared at it for a long time. The label was handwritten, slightly smudged like it had been touched too many times. I cleaned the dust off my old player, inserted the cassette, pressed play. It clicked once, then silence. They adjusted the volume. Static. Then a voice. Not mine. Not the whisper. A woman. Her voice cracked, raw. She was crying, saying, "I'm still here." They said it would stop if I cooperated. They said the door would stay shut. She gasped, then went quiet. Then she said something I will never forget. She said, "I can hear him. He's in the floor. He watches through the cracks, through the tiles, through the drain, then footsteps. Heavy, dragging, then a scream, then nothing." I let the tape play to the end. 60 full minutes of silence after the scream, then a click. Auto stopped. I rewound it, played it again. Same scream, same silence. But this time something new at the very end. Another voice. Low, male, calm. He said the line breaks when it remembers. I didn't sleep that night. I sat with the tape on the table. Then I flipped it over. There was writing on the back. One sentence. "I told you to stay away." The handwriting matched the label. It was hers. I didn't know what to do. I started packing. Grabbed a bag, wallet, shoes, phone. I was halfway down the stairs when I saw the hallway mirror. My reflection was standing still, but I wasn't. I moved my arm. My reflection didn't. It stared at me, then blinked once. I ran, out the door, into the street. But the moment I stepped outside, everything felt wrong. The air was still. No traffic, no people. Like the city had gone on pause. I looked up at my apartment window. My curtain moved. A silhouette passed behind it. I turned and ran down the street. I passed a man walking a dog. I waved, called out. He didn't turn, just kept walking, like I wasn't there. I kept running, past the cafe, the bus stop. Every face turned away from me. I stopped in front of a store window and saw it. My reflection, frozen again. It stared at me with wide eyes and whispered without sound. I read its lips. It said it's still open. I didn't go back to the apartment. I just kept walking. I don't even remember where my legs took me. I stopped checking street names after the third block. Everything felt wrong, off, like someone had rebuilt the city from memory and missed a few details. The shadows didn't move right. Traffic lights blinked, but no cars passed. I knocked on a door, no answer. Tried a shop, locked. The lights were on, but no one inside. I walked until my feet hurt, until the sky started to darken. Then I turned a corner and stopped breathing. I was back at my building, same alley, same door, same curtain fluttering in the third floor window. I hadn't turned around. I hadn't retraced my steps. But I was back. I tried to walk away again, took a different path, cut through a lot, climbed over a fence, walked straight for 20 minutes, and ended up at the front door again. It was like the building had become the center of a maze and everything else just looped around it. I went inside. No one in the hallway, no one on the stairs. My door was open, just slightly. I pushed it in. My apartment was clean, too clean, like no one had lived there. No dishes, no shoes, no books, just empty space, and the blue door across the hall staring at me like an eye. I walked over and opened it. Inside was the chair, the same one. But this time, there was someone sitting in it, back to me, still, silent. I stepped inside slowly. The figure didn't move. I walked around to face it. My heart stopped. It was me, not breathing, not blinking, just sitting there with my head tilted slightly, my mouth open like I'd been about to speak and forgot how. In my lap was a photo. I picked it up. It showed the same room, same chair, same angle, but the figure was gone. And in the corner was a mirror. My reflection was in it, smiling. I dropped the photo, backed out, closed the door. I didn't lock it. There was no point. I knew I hadn't walked into that room. I'd woken up inside it, and now the building wasn't just where I lived. It was where I had always been. I don't know how long I sat outside the blue door. Time didn't work the same anymore. My phone was dead. My watch had stopped. The hallway light flickered without rhythm. I pressed my hand against the floor. It felt warm, breathing, like the building had lungs and I was inside them. I opened the door again. The chair was empty now. The room darker. The writing on the wall had changed. New words scratched deep into the plaster. You came back. I stepped inside. No tape this time. No photo. Just silence. I stood in the center and turned slowly. Every wall looked the same, but something felt different. A seam. A line I hadn't seen before. I touched it and the wall shifted. A hidden panel clicked and opened inward. Behind it was a staircase, narrow, descending into black. I hesitated, then stepped down. The air got colder with every step. I counted 28 stairs before I stopped counting. At the bottom was a door, no handle, just a hole. I reached in and pulled. It opened with a groan and the smell hit me like a wave. Earth, mold, something older. The room was circular. Stone walls, a single bulb overhead, flickering. In the middle was a recording device, analog, running. And in front of it, a chair. Someone sat there, tied, head down. I stepped closer. The person looked up. It was my mother. Eyes sunken, face pale, mouth sewn shut. She stared at me like she'd been waiting forever. In her lap was a tape labeled, "Your Turn." I picked it up with shaking hands. The moment I touched it, the lights went out. I heard movement behind me, slow footsteps. I turned. Another version of me stepped forward. Same clothes, same face, same eyes, but older, tired. He didn't speak, just pointed to the chair. I backed away, said no. He pointed again. Louder, this time. His mouth opened. From it came 1,000 voices, all saying my name. I screamed, but there was no sound. My throat moved, but nothing came out. He stepped closer, hand on my shoulder, and whispered into my ear, "You open the door. Now you are the door." Everything went black.